Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. With the release of Rise of Iron just around the corner, a lot of us are starting the typical prep work for this next expansion. Now of course, just like with every expansion for Destiny, things are going to be a little different. So let's take a look at some things that I recommend doing to get ready for Rise of Iron, as well as clearing up some misconceptions like, should I be hoarding my engrams? Let's jump in and find out. So to start things off, let's talk about faction packages. Now, a lot of us probably have all the weapons we could ever want from the tower vendors. Now, of course, the exception could be those of us looking for that perfect longbow synthesis, but for the most part, a lot of us can agree that we're kind of tapped out on all of the weapons in the Taken King. I know that's how I've been feeling, so essentially I challenged myself to edge up all of my factions yet again. Now, if you're not familiar with what edging your faction is, it's essentially getting your reputation almost all the way up to 2500 so that you're within 1 or 2 bounty turn-ins from ranking up. You also want to prepare by having a couple bounties ready to turn in so that when Rise of Iron is released and all of the tower vendors have new product, you can essentially get a brand new package right out of the gate. And this will be especially handy since we learned that in Rise of Iron, we're actually going to have a choice between choosing weapon or armor packages once we rank up with a vendor. So to get the most out of this technique, you're going to want to edge up all 3 of the factions, your Vanguard reputation, your Crucible reputation, and the Gunsmith. Now of course we don't have any confirmation on whether or not the Gunsmith is actually going to be offering us new weapons, but there is a new foundry called Nadir, and there's a good chance that weapons from that foundry are going to be added into his loot table. Well, the question remains, how do you exactly edge up the Gunsmith since he grants you the reputation on completion without you having to turn it in? Well, essentially you want to get him within 200 points of getting ranked up, and then take one of his weapons, and then get it within 1 or 2 kills of completion. So as you can see here, I have this Amalan sniper rifle, and all I need to do is kill 1 fallen captain for it to rank up. Now, here's where things can potentially get very interesting. So one thing I'm going to experiment with, just for science purposes, is to try to stack my packages. Now, I know you can't stack more than 1 package at a time, but 1 is better than none. So the idea is to rank up with your faction, and then leave the package alone, and then go ahead and get enough reputation to be almost all the way up to the 2nd ranking. Now, ever since the Taken King, we've had to go to the actual vendors themselves to claim the package. They used to just simply go to the postmaster. The thing we ended up finding out in year 1 with the Dark Below and House of Wolves was that when you claimed those packages after the expansion, you would still get the items from the previous expansion simply because when you got those packages, the items you were receiving were already determined. So you would still get, let's say, House of Wolves items if you claimed those packages from your postmaster after the Taken King was released. Now, because the April update doesn't really count as an expansion, we still haven't really tested this out with the current system. And the thing I'm really most curious about is whether or not the unclaimed packages will be automatically changed to the new system where you can pick armor versus weapons. So as you can see, I'm kind of doing this for science purposes, and I don't necessarily recommend you do the same. In fact, you don't really need to edge any of your factions up at all. At this point in the Destiny lifecycle, I don't recommend rushing through content. Take your time, enjoy it, because we don't know when the next DLC is coming. Having said that, I see it as my job at this point to give you guys as much information about the new weapons and armor as I can. And as you can see here, I've edged up all of my factions from all of my characters so I can get my hands on as many weapons as possible. And that kind of leads us to the next topic, which is about engrams. Now, you might be seeing this around the community or on YouTube, that people are telling you to hoard your engrams, exotics, and legendaries. And just for the newer players, I'm talking about those who started in year 2, let me tell you a little bit about how the engrams really work. Now, this is something you probably don't notice too often, and that's the little Taken King logo in the upper right-hand corner of every single piece of weapon or armor you get in the game. So what does that little logo mean? Well, it's pretty simple. It tells you from what expansion that item came from. As I mentioned before, the April update is not an expansion, but was an update to the Taken King. That essentially means that any new weapons or armor that they have added into the game with the April update could be obtained by turning in engrams from before that update. So because of that, it's important to remember that once Rise of Iron comes out, any engrams that you currently have will still only yield you items from the Taken King loot tables. In fact, this is pretty much confirmed, as you can see the Rise of Iron items have a little axe in the upper right hand corner replacing the Taken King logo. So then the question remains, why on earth should you save your engrams? Well, the quick answer is you don't really need to. The longer answer, and the reason I'm doing it, is so that you have essentially a bank of marks so you can go shopping. Then of course there's the really bigger reason, which is that it'll help you rank up with the Cryptarch come day one. Now of course ranking doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a legendary item, but there's a chance. So let's say you don't necessarily care about getting a ton of weapons on day one. What else can you do to prepare? Well, I spent the last few weeks doing something I really wish I had done earlier, and that's doing some spring cleaning. I challenge all of you to go into your vaults and find all of the crap that you know you're never going to use again, and be okay with dismantling it. As Bungie currently has no plans to expand vault space, we're all going to need vault space come Rise of Iron with all of that shiny new weapons and armor. So do yourself a favor and make some space for it all. The next thing I definitely recommend doing is organizing all of your items. If you're somewhat of a hardcore player, you probably have more than one character. I have 3, and one of my least favorite things to have to do is transferring things like synths or planetary materials. So instead, I use an extension called Destiny Item Manager. I use it to equally distribute all of my items across all 3 characters, that way I never have to transfer anything. All of my characters have motes of light, all of them have 3 of coins, boosters, etc. So essentially this inventory screen that you're seeing in front of you is identical with all of my characters. Not only that, but I also gave each of my characters their own weapon and armor loadouts. They typically each have their class exclusives, as well as a couple legendaries and exotics from each slot. Now of course you're always going to have to be moving weapons around for things like modifiers, but at least they have a very diverse foundation. Another thing I did was to organize my ghosts. I essentially have a different ghost for each of the Glimmer bonuses. One for each of the alien races, and one for each of the character classes for the Crucible. So really the idea here is to clean up your inventory so you don't have to do it after Rise of Iron. This way you know exactly what you have and exactly what you have room for in your arsenal. My final tip might seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning either way, and that is to max out your Glimmer and marks. You're going to want the marks to buy something nice for yourself on day one, and you're going to need the Glimmer to upgrade it. For your first few weeks of Rise of Iron, you're going to be getting a lot of new weapons and armor, and upgrading them is more expensive than you might think. The last thing you want is to not be able to upgrade your weapon because you ran out of Glimmer. And of course 25,000 Glimmer might not be enough, so I recommend holding on to trade-in items like axiomatic beads and silken codexes instead of trading them in. I never trade mine in anymore, instead I just hoard it in my vault for a rainy day. But anyways, how are you preparing for Rise of Iron? Leave them in the comments below. Also keep in mind that Game Informer has teased us that we're going to be learning a lot more about the new Crucible features starting tomorrow. And while my channel has shifted focus to No Man's Sky for the first couple weeks of its launch, you can bet that I'm going to be covering every little juicy detail about what's new in the Crucible. If the rumors are believed to be true, we can expect private matches. I made a video a while back showing what I think that could look like, so click on the image on screen or the link in the description box below to watch that video. But anyways, drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more Destiny content. And I will see you all next time. But we're not going to stop there. If we take a closer look between the lines, can we start to uncover a serious conspiracy between the Iron Lords?